Welcome back. We were discussing identity and the Muslim woman. So let's carry on. What experiences have you had with your identity?
It's interesting that you say that, actually. I mean, a very close friend of mine, a couple of years back, her child, he was a 5-year-old boy who drew a picture at school of a man, I think, holding a gun or something like that, some kind of weapon. But, you know, boys do play cowboys and Indians, and this is quite common in our society. But immediately the teacher contacted the parent, and she asked her to explain herself, to explain her child's actions, why he'd drawn that in such a way. And I just found that quite, unusual and quite interesting, the fact that...
You would ask, would the same question be asked if it was a non-practicing or non-Muslim?
So I think people do draw assumptions and then the stereotypes, and perhaps...
These are the misconceptions, isn't it?
But I think it's important to note as well, I think we could see them in a positive light too. I mean, I think it puts the responsibility on us to be able to, get rid of these misconceptions that are brought about. And I think the only way is through dialogue and to speak to non-Muslims.
I would say that almost all of our interactions are based on identity, because when someone meets you, they make so many assumptions within those first few minutes. And for us as Muslim women, you can imagine the kind of assumptions that are being made. I would say, alhamdulillah, most of my interactions have been positive. I did have one negative experience, which happened a couple of years ago when I was, when the whole thing came out about the Birmingham schools. And I was in Sainsbury's, just doing shopping, minding my own business. And from the corner of my eye, I noticed this lady giving me a really dirty look. And I thought, what, did I just imagine that? Anyway, I looked back and she looked me up and down. And I said, I'm sorry, do you have a problem? Or is something wrong? And she goes, no, nothing's wrong with me. She goes, but you lot have a problem, don't you? Dear. And it's the way she said, you lot. So that means that she's putting us all Muslims together and making...
She's made up her mind.
She's made up her mind. She's making an assumption, stereotyping, exactly, absolutely. And after that came a whole tirade of insults, you know. And all I said to her was, well, you know, if you're ignorant enough to believe whatever you read in the news, then that's up to you. And just had to really walk away. Although I was very shocked that it happens. It's not something I was expecting. Sort of takes you by surprise.
What do you do when someone says like that to you? It's just a lack of knowledge.
I mean, the thing is, you can have a conversation with someone if they're willing to sit down and open up their mind a little bit and talk to you about things that are worrying them. You know, if you're worried about whatever is happening in schools, then you can, you know, have a conversation about it. Yeah. But instead, if you're just being hate-mongering and just, you know, calling names, that's not really going to get you anywhere. And you can't really argue with people like that, to be honest with you.
And what kind of sacrifices have you had to make because of your hijab?
I think when I kind of started reading into Islam, I was brought up in a Muslim family, but not necessarily practicing. When I started reading about Islam, when I started reading the Quran translation, and I kind of started practicing Islam, my friends at that time were predominant, well, none of them were Muslims at that time. And so, you know, I remember having to kind of disassociate myself from them, and they in fact disassociated themselves from me because of the way that I started dressing. And I think that it was a difficult time for me because then I did become isolated, and you know, it was a difficult time for me. But I think that, you know, I think the power of the dua, it's very important in Islam, and I think that, you know, I just made so much dua. It was a huge test, and I think that it took a while. I read a lot I started reading the Quran translation, and the strength that I gained from that, the tests for the believers, and also the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He went through so many tests. You know, his own tribe went against him, but yet he did not compromise his belief. Okay, and he did not, you know, he didn't think, okay, well, you know, I need to start following what they're doing now. So I think that's really important. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He made away from me because I think people started then seeing me as a Muslim girl, and then there were other sisters who started approaching me, and then, you know, I formed a new friendship group, and it was positive. It was a positive. They were a positive influence on me at the time. So I think, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, so I mean, as where my situation is concerned, obviously I'm a convert, so if I wasn't wearing hijab, I think it might have been a bit easier for my family to accept it. But because I was so visually Muslim, it did create a little bit of conflict. So obviously every time they see me, they see a completely different person to, you know, who they brought up.
But how did they take it?
Alhamdulillah, it was very difficult. Obviously, it was very difficult for them. But, you know, like you're saying, with Allah's help, with dua, with patience, with sabr, you know, they came round to it. And now, you know, alhamdulillah, I'm at a point where even when I'm at home and I'm at my parents' house and I can say, you know, it's time for salah, I'm just going to pray. And there's absolutely no problem. And never in a million years did I think, you know, alhamdulillah, you know.
So why is our dress code so important for our identity as Muslim women? Why is it so important?
I mean, our dress code is important because, you know, haya is such an important concept.
It's a part of our deen.
It's a part of our deen. Modesty is a part of our deen.
And dressing like this, it constantly reminds us of who we are.
But it's also for men and for women. You know, obviously for women it's more pronounced. And like you're saying, when we dress like this, we are aware. It keeps us sort of on our toes, you know, to behave appropriately, and to know that we are setting an example, you know, of how a Muslimah should behave, and it's a form of dawah as well.
When I walk down the street or if I go to a gathering, I'm immediately identified as a Muslim woman, and I expect to be identified as a Muslim woman. And you know, the knowledge that I am a Muslim woman means that I'm a woman of worth, a woman of dignity, and I know that, and I interact with that knowledge, and my interaction with that knowledge dictates how others interact with me. So because they know I know my importance and my worth, they will behave with me in that way. They know that they cannot cross limits with me, and that's because I am identified as a Muslim woman, and I'm very proud of that. And that, I think that's why our dress code and the way we behave and the way we approach people and interact with people is so important.
Because exactly, and I think it's a form of dawah, it's indirect dawah, because we are representing Islam just like a doctor has a badge, you know, wherever, you know, we, by wearing hijab and jilbab, we are, you know, dressing modestly, we are saying that we are actually you know, worshipping Allah, we worship one God, and then also the fact that it's not only about just a physical sense, it's also then the responsibilities that come from within that, how we engage, as you said, with people, and you know, being kind, not being foul-mouthed, not engaging in gossip, backbiting.
So it's everything. It's everything in the round. It's not just our dress code, and you know, then the characteristics come in. Is the Islamic characteristics that defines us.
So I think in Surah Al-Furqan, I think it mentions 12 points, 12 characteristics that a Muslim should have, and one of them is that a Muslim should walk with humility and humbleness on earth. And I think that's quite, you know, I like that point, because sometimes people get carried away with their, you know, with their status, etc., and then they have these egos, these huge egos. And I think as Muslims, we need to remember, we need to remember that, you know, with Allah, it's the one, the more pious one, who's superior than the the one, and then the one who's maybe dressed better, dressed in designers all over, you know,
Yeah, so like I said, we need to be identified as Muslim women. So when we walk into a gathering or when we walk into some meeting, I expect all lewdness to stop, cease immediately, because I don't expect people to carry on misbehaving or anything, and they do. To be honest, they do. They will stop when they see me enter, and they give me that dignity. And I'm proud of that.
I haven't, to be honest with you, I haven't found that it always does stop, especially if you're working in an open plan office. I worked in, anyway, this is quite a long time ago, but where the workers are generally of a younger generation. So if you've got employees who are quite young, then there's going to be a certain kind of banter going on, let's say, you know. So I do, and it does kind of make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. But I find that as I've got older and the kind of where I've worked has changed, that has changed quite a lot. So
it is our code of conduct that defines us, and our code of conduct should be a reflection of our deen. We need to redefine ourselves, we need to realize who we are, and the only way we can do it is by knowledge and by creating that relationship with revelation. Thank you for all your thoughtful input. Okay, thank you, Halima, for coming to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, Natasha, for coming to the show.
Pleasure being here.
It is our code of conduct that defines us. Our code of conduct should be a reflection of our deen. The way we behave, the way we deal with people should be a reflection of our deen. We need to realize who we are, why we are here in this dunya, the purpose of our existence. Seeking the pleasure of Allah is the greatest achievement one can reach. To be able to stand on the Day of Judgment and for Allah to say, I am pleased with you, that should be the reason for our existence. Thank you for watching. Until next time. Assalamu alaikum.